Hey guys, welcome to my new video series where I want to highlight different technical implementations that I did for the game audio of Footgun Underground. In this video, I want to take a look at a method that I used to acoustically emphasize different game objects based on their importance to the player. The goal was to move sounds that are not that important to the player into the background and keep the mix as clean as possible for best gameplay overview. I used this on different enemy movement sounds, enemy projectiles, and even the ball weapons that the player is using. The idea was to use the direction that the game object where the sound is attached to is moving in relation to the position of the player character. FMOD has a built-in parameter that is called the event cone angle, but this requires the game object that the sound is attached to be facing in its movement direction to calculate the angle between the event and the player. But since most of the game objects I'm using this method on, for example, the enemies or even the balls that are spinning like crazy, do not face in their movement direction. And so I couldn't use the event cone angle built-in parameter, and I had to create my own parameter, which basically has the same range from 0 to 180 degrees, but is calculating the angle in a custom script that I developed that I will show you later in the video. Let's have a quick look at the parameter itself, because I set up some seek speed values for the value changes of the parameter itself. I used the asymmetric option for this because I felt like the descending values should change at a higher rate than the ascending values, which basically means when the enemy or the threat is facing towards you all of a sudden, then this change should affect the value of the player event to player angle way faster than if the enemy or the threat is facing away from the player all of a sudden. Higher threat, faster change, lower threat, lower change. The specific values are just trial and error, and these are the values that I ended up with, which sounded best in my opinion. So just not having the value flip in an instant, which would have sounded really weird. But first, let's have a look what the parameter is even doing in FMOD with the sound. So I put the parameter as an automation on the volume fader. I used it on a low pass, on the reverb send, and on the maximum distance of the sound. So this basically means the more the game object is moving in the direction of the player, so the lower the angle is, the more the volume is increased, the more the low pass is lifted, so the sound gets clearer. There's less reverb on the sound, and the maximum distance is increased. On the other hand, when the more the event is moving away from the player, or the bigger the angle gets, it's basically the inverse. So the sound gets quieter, it is getting more of a high cut, more reverb send, and the maximum distance that the sound is audible is getting decreased. So basically this moves the sound into the background of the mix the more the event is moving away from the player. So let's have a quick listen to how it sounds like. This was a sound for an enemy acid projectile. Heading over to Unity, you can see the FMOD event to player angle script attached to the flying bug enemy. You have a few options in here. I will not explain every single one of them, but one of the most important things is that you have a list of studio event emitters that you can populate with the sounds or the emitters that you want to be adjusted by the calculated angle between the enemy movement direction and the player position. And you also have a checkbox if you want to use a rigid body that is attached to the same game object, because there is a difference in the calculation method that I'll show you later, if you have a rigid body or not. Inside the C# script, you can see a lot of variables being declared at the top of the script, but the core of the script is the calculate angle function. So basically, I'm just using the current player position that is declared in a new vector2, the current event position, and then I calculate the vector from the event to the player. After that, there's a distinction if I'm using a rigid body or not. That's the checkbox from the inspector view that I showed you earlier. And basically, if I am using a rigid body, then I can just use the velocity normalized for the event movement direction. And if I'm not using a rigid body, I have to calculate the movement direction myself by using the current event position minus the previous event position stored inside this variable in the last frame, divided by time.delta time. After having calculated the event movement direction by either of these two methods, I can calculate the final event cone angle by using the vector2.angle between the event to player vector and the event movement direction. This value is a value between 0 and 180. And this is then set inside the set parameter function on every emitter that is stored inside of the studio event emitters list. Finally, let's have a little comparison between the method applied and it not being applied. So at first I'm playing this little test scene with the wasp enemy without the event to player angle modifications. So basically you can hear that the sound of the movement of the wasp is only being altered by the distance to the player, which is also affecting the volume, the higher frequencies and the amount of reverb sent. But now let's have a compared listen to the activated event to player angle script. You you could see the event cone angle value displayed in this field as well. And you could clearly hear that the sound of the wasp was being way quieter and more muffled when it is moving away from the player compared to when it is moving directly to the player. Either by just moving in the general direction or by attacking him directly, which is very beneficial in a gameplay context where you have multiple of the wasp enemies or multiple things happening, that you most clearly hear the sound of the enemy that is more of a threat to you than the others. Okay, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned something new. Would love to see you back on the next one, and yeah, have a good day. See you.